everybody, it's Skillbite. My wife has been on me to do the epoxy garage floor coating for several years actually, and if you've ever seen my garage floor, it showed up in a couple videos, you know that it was a mess, and honestly it really still is, but it has a lot of oil and paint and grease, and I actually used it and wasn't particularly careful, so it was pretty nasty. So I was putting off doing the floor covering coating, and anyway, well, my excuses are at an end. I'm now doing it with her help, of course, but anyway, this video is going to cover putting the epoxy floor coating down, and as you can see, I've already started on the prep, and we will go over that when we get to that point of the video. This video basically will show the process of doing it right, and I'll have some good tips as we go, because believe me, there's some tricks. Now we're using a kit, and the camera, hopefully that doesn't look too bad when it's done. We're using a kit that we got from a hardware store. It makes it a little simpler, make sure you got everything you need. Hopefully the person you buy yours from will be able to answer any questions you have, and so if you've got some other questions that maybe local to the weather perhaps in your area. So let's start with what you need. Honestly, the number one thing you need is time. Now, like I said, my floor was pretty dirty. It will have taken me 3 days, assuming it doesn't take longer. I've been working on it for 2. A Friday evening, and actually, I take that back, a Thursday evening, a Friday evening. It is now Saturday, and I've got oil stain remover on it now, which I'm hoping will dry soon. It was actually put on about 10 p.m. last night. It's now 11, and the next morning, and it's still a little damp, but the humidity is also 80 degrees, so that is definitely not helping me. The hotter it is, the more humid it is, the longer it'll take, and we'll get to how that affects the paint here in a little bit. So make sure you got the time. Some things you're going to need. You will need a plastic can, watering can, not metal. This is for the etching, and that uses acid, and the acid will react with the metal, so make sure it's plastic. You're going to need some sort of stiff bristle broom or a deck broom for scrubbing. That's what this is. And if you want to just get on your hands and knees, okay, maybe, but this was very helpful in the cleaning the floor. A squeegee was very helpful. A fairly long-handled squeegee for when you rinse. You'll have to rinse several times, and if your garage is like mine, the water does not run out as much as I'd like it to, and so the squeegee was very helpful, especially with the pressure washing portion. You'll need rubber gloves and boots when you're doing the etching, because again, there's acid, and you might want to use them at other times, especially the boots when you're rinsing. Eye protection. They recommend a 3/8 inch nap roller, and you will want an extension cord. This is for actually putting down the epoxy paint. You will need an extension pole. And of course, you know, a paint tray. You'll need a brush for the edges, and painter's tape if you're going to be careful with it, which, you know, hopefully you are. I will say this: make sure you read the instructions on whatever product you get, because there's, you know, I'm giving you a fair bit of detail, but not near the level of what your instructions will have. So that's kind of the intro. What I have done so far is most of the prep, and the prep, I will tell you right now, it's 80+% of this being a good job. If you've got a new garage floor that's, you know, it's dried, read the instructions for how to test whether your garage floor is dried and isn't holding water. I'm not going to get into that. It's very simple, but it's in the instructions. But if you've got a newer garage floor that doesn't have oil spilt on it and all that, then prep will be quick. You know, it may even only be a day, but there's time. You got to have time for drying. You know, when you rinse things, like after the etching, you got to rinse. You got to let it dry completely. Now, here in Tennessee today, it's 80% humidity, so it's just not drying fast at all. But basic steps for the prep. What I did is I scraped the surface with a putty knife. I got a stiff putty knife, and you can see it sitting on the stairs there next to the crud cutter. And I had some areas that I had a rug that I had in here, and you know, it had the plasticky surface underneath. Well, it gets hot, and I had some of that stuck on the floor, and the dirt had gotten in on it. So I had to use a putty knife, a stiff putty knife, and scrape those areas on the floor. I recommend putting like a piece of cardboard down to sit on. That's what I do to save my knees, and that helps. But yeah, that took a long time scraping. So make sure you got all the obvious stuff up first. Then I recommend doing a pressure wash. Start at the back. You know, try to be careful, don't soak your drywall, but pressure wash it. And again, the squeegee, long handle squeegee, was useful in that. One of the key steps, and this is one of the big tips, if you've got oil or grease or some sort of, you know, water repellent substance on your floor, the thing that we found works really well is Tide. Take some Tide with obviously some water, scrub it in those areas, you know, and you may, if it's too big of an area, just, you know, do a patch at a time. Scrub it in about 5 minutes, maybe max. Don't let it dry, but then don't let it dry. Make sure I'm clear on that. While it's still wet, put some baking soda on it. Scrub it. Then, right after that, again, don't let it dry, put vinegar on top of all of that and scrub it. Then, as soon as you're done scrubbing, rinse it. So you do that. If you've got some bad oil stains, which I had some, which you saw, the white stuff on the surface, you can get some oil stain remover. They're all different brands, and I won't say they all, but most of them work pretty much the same. You take, and it's a liquid, and you pour it down on the area. You then spread it around, you know, overlap it, the stain by an inch, just, you know, what they all say. And then you let it dry. And it's like a extra powerful kitty litter. It'll pull up the oil. And that's what I'm waiting to dry. So I did the Tide baking soda vinegar thing first on pretty much the whole floor. Then in the bad areas that are still there, I did the oil stain remover. That stuff is not cheap, but it does work. It does work. And again, the hotter and the more humid it is, the longer it'll take. Stuff we got, I think, says it takes like 8 hours, you know, to dry. It's been over 12, and it's still not completely dry. And I'm not saying you have to let it completely dry, but if it does completely dry, you're going to get all of the value out of it. If you clean it off early, you're not. But it may have been long enough where you've already got everything that was on your floor already. So use your judgment there. You can always put more down. It just costs time and a little money. But honestly, again, prep is at least 80% of this. That is, if prep is what will determine if it lasts. So that's the oil stain. So what we'll do when this dries, and actually we probably won't let it completely dry because I'm not sure it's going to dry by the end of the day. It's 80% humidity. What we're going to do is take and rinse all of this off, and again, the squeegee will come in handy, because the next step is your etching. And read the instructions for yours, and it's an acid. In our case, they call it fast prep. Yours may have a different name, but this is where you use the plastic watering can, and you'll take and just spread, and I'll probably get into, I may show this in the video. You'll just put it in your watering can and just spread it across the floor. And what the etching does is it eats away just a little bit of the top surface. And because if it's a garage floor, it's probably been buffed, and it's real smooth, and smooth paint does not adhere to smooth. If your garage floor was already painted, you got to sand it. You got to make sure that it's a bit of a rough finish, and that's what the acid does to the cement. Also, let me mention that if your floor has been coated, not just painted, but if it's got a coating, some of them will put a sealer on it. That has to come up before this epoxy paint basically will adhere properly. One of the things that you want to look for is if the water is beading. So you know when you wax your car and it rains, you got these nice bubbles on your car, your paint, because it's beading up, the water's beading instead of soaking into your paint. Well, it's the same way on your cement floor. And I will tell you this, it can be hard to tell. I just, maybe with experience it gets easier, and probably does. But it was hard for me to tell whether it's actually beading or not. But if you kind of take the idea of paint, the wax on your car, and it rain, how that looks, that might help you be able to tell. And when you do the acid, it should fizz. You should see some little fizz or some bubbles coming up. That means that it's actually working on the surface of the concrete. If it doesn't, that means you probably got a sealer, and you're going to have to get the sealer off. Following the etching, you got to rinse it. Just rinse it with a hose until it's running clean. And again, the squeegee will help a lot with that. You could probably use a pressure washer, but really all you're trying to do is there'll be a dust from that etching that's left behind, and you want that you got to get rid of all of that. You want it to run clean. That'll give you your good adhesion for this coating, and that is critical for it staying down, especially where you drive and park. Your front tires, if you ever turn your tires while parked in your garage, or that's where you get the most friction, and that's where it'll most likely come up. So pay special attention to where your tires actually run and stop in the garage. Those are the most critical. So that's about it for this part. Again, I've got the oil stain remover on mine. Let me just back out a little bit. And you can see I got a fan in the window, and I have some other fans that were blowing air around. But that is what it's looking like right now, and we will be getting rid of this oil stain remover here shortly, probably right after I eat, because I'm hungry. And then we will rinse. Alright, I'm back from eating, feeling much better now. So I've got the oil stain remover, and actually what I do, I think I said we rinse. We actually got to, what I'm going to do is sweeping this up, sweeping it up, and I will put it in a dustpan and then dispose of it. Then we will do the rinse. Okay, so the floor has been rinsed, and part of that was we used the squeegee to get it out, water out, which I think also helps moving anything that's floating in the water. It does not have to dry completely for the etching. In fact, you'll be you will be wetting the floor when you do the etching. So it doesn't have to be completely dry. You can see there's still a little bit of water on the ground. And for the etching, what you want to do, what the instructions say to do, is to do like 10 by 10 foot sections, and you got to put it down and then use the firm bristled brush and scrub it both directions. What I think is going to work better for me is to have sections, and what I'm going to do is actually start at the front of the garage and do a section that's about 3 feet deep all the way over and across. I'm going to actually start, trying not to move the camera too fast, at the entrance, and I'm going to do about a 3-foot section all the way across, because then once you scrub it, you then have to rinse it and wet the next section. So what I'll do is then I will step back, I'll do the next 3 feet, and that way when I'm rinsing, it's all going to the front, and it'll be parts that have been done. And the wetting, well, it's already going to get some wet when I'm trying to rinse what's in front of it. So I think that that will work well. Do what you think works for you, best for you. This particular formula creates 1 gallon. I've got a jug. It says 1 gallon here, and yes, I have these lovely rubber gloves on, eye protection as well, and duck boots. I can see, looking in here, and I don't know if this will show, but there's 1 gallon right there. So what I'm going to do is take this, dump it in, and then I'm going to fill it with water until it hits 1 gallon. That way I'll know I've got the right mixture. Then I will come into the garage, and again I'm going to do like 3 foot wide and do this number all the way across. Then I will take my brush, my hard bristled brush, which is over here, and I will scrub that direction and that direction, then rinse and repeat all the way in. So you get the idea. It's not that tough. So I'm going to start on that. So we used the etching that came with the kit, and in some places, all right, it did well. In others, not so much. And we ran out before we could finish. It got fairly close, but it wasn't enough. And I think we tried to make it last, and that was probably why some of the areas nothing happened to the surface. So what we've done is, rather than paying $20 for another one of those, we just got some muriatic acid. And now I will tell you, this is much more potent, and it has a different process of use. You mix it with water, following the instructions on it. Be sure, by the way, when mixing your acid with water, make sure you put the water in first, then add your acid. Acid can actually react if you add water to acid, so don't do that. So I will be mixing the appropriate amount, and then basically you pour the mixture on your area that you want to cover. You then do the scrubbing. You then in this stuff, you let it set for 5 to 10 minutes to do its work, and I think this is stronger stuff. I think it'll definitely work better, and it's cheaper. This was like half the price, so I think, and it's got will do more. So this would easily do this whole the serial car garage at least twice. So anyway, and one thing, when we used the other acid, there was no fizzing. There was no bubbling. When you first poured it on the deeper spots, yes, you could see a little fizzy, but that was it. So just FYI. All right, I'm back after 2 days. Yeah, it rained yesterday. Yay. Rain will mess you up when you're doing this because the humidity will just keep things from drying. I do have a couple tips on the etching. I showed you what we decided to use because we ran out with the stuff that came with the kit. It was not quite enough for our single car garage to finish. We got all the way up to right here, right where the shop vac is, and what's that, 6 feet left. And to be honest, it was still, and that was spreading it really thin. So we got that other stuff, which worked well. It says, one of the reasons we got it was it says that low fumes, and that is absolutely correct. It does not have near the amount of fumes as the other type. And one thing about it is it doesn't turn yellow when it's working, so you can't tell as easily if it's working. But it did work. And make sure it does most of, when you etch, most of it is done right when it hits the concrete. That's when you can see it kind of fizzle a little. And so I try to get a good coverage there when you're doing an edge. When you're at the side of the garage floor, try to run it across that way, and then sweep it in using your scrub brush. Sweep it in so it doesn't, you don't want it to go down, and there's a little, I don't know if this will show, there's just a little bit of space between the concrete floor and the cinder block there. You don't want too much going down in there, because you're not going to be able to get that out. You just have to rinse. So that's my etching tip, and we redid the whole floor with that other stuff and went through 3 gallons of it. So, you know, ours is hopefully it looks pretty good. You can, if you look at the surface, and again, the light is really bad in here, so I don't guarantee you'll see this, but you can see that the surface is not smooth. It's rough. It's got little pinholes where the top has been pulled off, broken up. We've had a couple fans going. The garage door is shut. It's been, as I said, it rained yesterday. The humidity level in here was over 80%, and it just wasn't drying. And so we've shut the garage door, have fans blowing, had the door that goes into the house open as much as possible to try to bring the humidity level down. And hopefully this will focus. It's still almost, it's what, 67 or somewhere in there, humidity. But it's also cooler since we're running the air in the house, so that helps on the time for paint. I will tell you this: when you know, with the etching, you've got to rinse that out well. Anytime that you're doing rinsing, be sure, I suggested having that long-handled squeegee. Be sure to squeegee away from the edges of your concrete quickly. One of the problems that we had was that the edges, there was water, even doing what we did, the concrete blocks were wet, and those took a long time to dry. In fact, they're still not completely dry, but the concrete floor is dry, so we will be able to continue to paint it this morning. But if you squeegee it away quickly, that'll keep the minimum amount of water will run down between your floor and the concrete block, assuming you have concrete block, which goes down to the dirt, and you know, if you get too much water in there, you could have issues. So that's about it for the etching. We're getting ready to start the paint, and first thing you got to do is mix. This is a 2-part. This has the paint and then the epoxy hardener, and I'll show you that here next.